Hi everyone, it's Lucy from My Crazy Craft Life, and I made this card today using the Gorilla Love from Stampendous stamp set. And I thought it would be super cute because those two gorillas are facing each other, and there's a sentiment in there that says gorillas just want to have fun, to make like a seesaw. So I'm hoping that I worked out all of the bugs for this, so if you decide you want to make it, you'll be able to make it without having to go through all of the dumb stuff that I did. So what I did was kind of made myself a template. You're going to need a card base. I used 5.5 by 4.25 top panel for it. I have some Hill in green construction paper or green cardstock so that I can kind of layer it up, and then I have the parts for the seesaw portion of it. So first thing I'm going to do is get into the template. So basically what I did is I took a 5.5 by 4.25 cards piece of panel, or front of it, and I just drew a line down the center on both sides to kind of make that plus sign, and then I put a hole in it because that's where the hole will go, and then a 1/2 inch from each side in the center of the center line going horizontally, and this card is going to be horizontal, so it's 5.5 inches long by 4.25 inches high. And I cut a 2-inch kind of square, or not square, but a rectangle area where the mechanism is going to go so that the seesaw can work. And that's really all you need for that, and I just made the template because then it made it really easy just to pop it on top of it and cut it out. Here I used Hero Arts Intense Black ink to do the stamping for the gorillas, and I just did some quick Copic coloring. The colors I used are all listed there, and I end up using my scan and cut to cut all these images out. Now, one of the goofy things that I did was, when you're making the seesaw portion of it, you want to make sure that it's longer than the area of the holes for the mechanism to go into. So the first time that I made it too short, and it kept getting caught when it was trying to seesaw back and forth, I guess you want to say. And so then I ended up having to make it a little bit longer. So I ended up making mine 5 inches long. So here I am going to put all of that in once I finished up the coloring and cutting out the images. Like I said, just used that center, popped out or made a little hole in it because that's where the brad will go. And then I just put in, or cut out, those little rectangle areas where the mechanism will be able to slide up and down. So I decided I wanted to set the monkeys on the seesaw, but I wanted it to look like they were actually sitting on it. So I just used the X-Acto knife and I cut out kind of where their leg goes and where their arm was, so that it kind of made a little lip that I could fit into it, and it kind of made it look like they were sitting there. So then I'm going to do some Distress Oxide blending to give the background, because even though I'm going to put the hills, which I actually end up making into grass with a different dye because I didn't like the way the hills were, and I wanted to kind of hide the rectangles for the mechanism. Not completely, I mean you can still see it a little bit, but I just didn't want it to be quite so blaring sitting out. And then where this is the actual card base, and where it's going to be sitting on the card base is where I put the color just on the card base, just so that when you look through the rectangle areas you won't be able just to see white, they'll match the background. But so like I said, I just wanted to make that a little bit green. But then I do end up making the sky, and I used broken china, peacock feathers, worn lipstick, and the amber one for the Distress Oxides for the sky, and I used the clover green and the peeled paint for the grass area on it. So I put the mechanisms on the back of the pennies because that's going to be the weight that kind of holds it in place from the mechanism, and then there I was just filling in. Now the seesaw piece that I made, like I said, was 5 inches long, and it's about an inch wide. I stuck a hole in the center of it, and at first I made that center piece, that little triangle area there, and I didn't really like it that small, so I ended up making a bigger one, but I was just kind of making sure that it was moving and working correctly. So there I put the mechanisms on the back of the seesaw, and I glued that there with some really good glue to kind of hold it down there. I used art glitter glue. And then, like I said, I end up just taking off that piece and getting a different one. This was just scrap paper that I had. It was actually from circles that I had made for something else. And so I just get the piece out of there and I cut it, and it ends up being about an inch and a half, 2 inches, and I take the there, it's about an inch and a half, and I put the thing in the circle, and I just use my crocodile to kind of round out the edges. I thought that looked better than the smaller one. It kind of made more sense for a seesaw to have the bottom there. Now when you're using the brad and you put it in there, you want to make sure that you don't put it down too tight and really, press it down. So what I was doing was using just the edge of like a scissors or something that you can fold it over so that it still has some area to move, because if it goes too tight it won't move properly and easily to go up and down. So I used some foam tape and I ended up doubling this up so that it had plenty of room in the back there to move around. And you want to make sure that you don't get any of the tape around the areas, the rectangles where you want your mechanism to move, and that nothing is going to get in the way of that. So there again, I was just trying it out, making sure that it worked and whatnot. And like I said, then I forgot to stamp my sentiment, but you will want to do that beforehand. I mean, I was lucky that I was able to get this to stamp well. And in the center there I just put "Gorillas just want to have fun." I thought that was cute. Made me laugh. And then I'm going to, like I said, decide on that I don't really want the hills, because I just thought that the grass looked a little bit better to kind of hide those, but I didn't want it so high up to kind of hide the rectangle area that you couldn't really see the monkeys. So I wanted to make sure it wasn't too high. So I end up cutting it out with that. Now the other thing I do is I take some Distress Oxides and I use the same clover color and the peeled paint just to give it some dimension so it just doesn't look like a flat green piece of cardstock. And I glued those together. And then when I was putting the foam tape on, because again you're going to want foam tape because you don't want the panels to get in the way of the seesaw going up and down. So I doubled up, I think I actually tripled the foam tape on the grass. So this is a pretty thick card. And there I was just putting, actually gluing down the images and making sure that those were good to stay there. I did put a little foam dot on the top of that triangle, kind of the base of the seesaw, just to prop it up a little bit to make sure that it moved well. And that seemed to work really well. So then I take the panel and I pop it onto the card base, so that portion is done. So then after I got through getting my grass together and deciding how I wanted it and cutting it down to the size I wanted it and gluing it together, when I was putting the foam tape on it, I put it on the wrong side. I put it on the side that I put the Distress ink on, and this card, I had a lot of different things go on, and I was kind of irritated by this point because I was working on this for a good 2 hours, and I was kind of over the card at this point, even though I loved how it turned out and I thought it was really cute. After you're working on something for a while, you're just kind of done. And see, like here you can see it, that it's a different color, but when I was sitting there doing it, I could not see it. Now when you're putting the foam tape on here again, you want to make sure that you do not get that the foam tape doesn't get in the way of that seesaw, so you want to make sure that you keep it away from there. But anyway, so when I ripped off the tape, I kind of ripped some of the cardstock, and at this point I refused to start over with the green cardstock because I would actually have to go and get another whole piece because I didn't have much left, and redo it with the distress colors. So what I ended up doing was just making another one and putting it over the top of it. So I just kind of hid that mistake there so that we didn't have to see it, and the person who receives the card, they don't watch this video, they will not know any of the better to know that there was a mistake like that ripped a little bit when I was peeling the tape off of the front of it. So that is what I ended up doing to kind of cover up that mistake. And like I said, I just used the Distress Oxides again to give it some color. Popped that on there, cut it down after I glued it on there to see how far I needed it, because I had already had the foam tape on the back. And like I said, I did end up tripling this foam tape to make sure that it was nice and high to stay away from the seesaw mechanism. So for the most part, that card is done. What I end up doing is just kind of putting the little finishing touches. As part of the stamp set, there was a banana and some hearts, and so I thought, since it was just a fun card saying gorillas just want to have fun, that I would add some of the hearts and the bananas all over the grass, and a banana in his hand, and then they just seesawed up and down. I then hid a few. I hid a few of the bananas inside of the grass, not hid, but kind of had them peeking out of the grass, and I thought that was super cute. So this was an interesting card to make. It was a lot of fun. It really, after I kind of got everything, and now that I've done it once, it's a fairly easy card, so definitely I would not be intimidated by doing it again, because like I said, it's pretty simple. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for joining me.